prices right now are like pretty low. I mean, $50 a barrel. If they go up to 60 or 70, then you're going to go over $4 a gallon. You know, a couple of years ago they were at about $120 a barrel, which is a lot. I read a scary book a while ago called $25 a gallon. It scared me. I was like, okay, I'm buying a Prius now, because it's only going to get, I don't know if it's going to get worse, but sometimes the prognosticators are incorrect. The book thinks that basically that, and I'm going way off topic here, sorry, but the book basically says that at some point China and India will get so big and demand so much oil that they'll start sucking away the oil reserves that we need to, you know, make our economy go and keep inflation down and stuff. The exact opposite has happened, actually. There seems to be a reaction against oil anyway. People are buying more and more hybrid vehicles. The market is doing that. Battery power is a lot better than what it used to be, so we're starting to see electric vehicles. We're starting to see a lot of people bike more. It's like a proliferation of like fitness going on, like organic, green, vegetarian stuff, you know, that's populating our culture, which is kind of cool, I guess. I don't know, but back then that didn't exist, and so I think when you have inflation based on oil prices going up, it leads to a recession, and Gerald Ford was really struggling with a tremendous recession, and he wasn't able to really tame that recession because, again, he only served one term, not even a whole term, and in that term, he was a president that was a nice guy, but not a good coalition builder between parties. And so one of the things that's interesting that starts to happen is you're going to have, in the 1976 election, and this is one of the PowerPoint for this thing right there. In 1976, you have a guy named Ronald Reagan come to national prominence. Ronald Reagan is a former governor of California, an actor, and he's a very conservative guy, and he tries to take the nomination away from Gerald Ford. Unfortunately, the Republicans at the time were a little more moderate. They elect Gerald Ford to be their guy in 1976, and the Democrats nominate a guy named Jimmy Carter. Jimmy Carter? Talk like him? Jimmy Carter was from Georgia. I'm sorry. Jimmy Carter was from Georgia. He was a former peanut farmer and a former governor of Georgia. And Jimmy Carter tried to be a person who tried to identify with normal, everyday people. There's video of him actually walking around, shaking hands while he's campaigning for president, talking to people, learning about them, learning their stories, without like a big entourage of Secret Service people, you know, that are trying to protect him. He wasn't that kind of person. He really tried to, like I say, identify with just the average person. And a lot of people found that very refreshing about a politician, that a politician would not want to be kind of on an ivory tower in a pedestal and somebody to, like, you know, worship or whatever. But Jimmy Carter was kind of an everyman. And he was a Sunday school teacher, and he was very religious. In fact, he teaches Sunday school even to these songs. He's getting up there. He's like in his 90s right now. And he does a lot of work with charitable organizations. He's just a good, solid dude, you know, but not a good president in a lot of ways. It's hard to be a nice guy and be in power, you know. But what's interesting about this election, if you look at it, is this is the last time that a Democrat has basically dominated in the South. In fact, this is almost unheard of. But Jimmy Carter, again from Georgia, able to corral all of these Southern votes. Now, from henceforth, every single presidential election, this entire block of countries, I mean states, you know what I mean, states, they're all going to be voting Republican. And but Jimmy Carter, once he gets elected, he does have some issues. There he is right there. Now look at this man, just a wholesome guy. Kind of looks a little bit like Howdy Doody. Just kind of, just a good man, Jimmy Carter. That's what he sounded like. It says lack of direction. Right after Jimmy Carter was elected, okay, just to tell you about how the fact he was an everyday man. When he was parading around the White House, which is what presidents do when they're elected and inaugurated, right? They have a big parade. Jimmy Carter's the only president that I can remember to not ride around in a limousine. He wanted to just walk around with his wife Rosalind and just say people and shake their hand and just have this image of just a guy who's a president, not a president who wants this, is like a power hungry, full of himself. Jimmy Carter did not do that, and that's, I think, why people elected him. But once we got in office, he didn't really have a plan about what he wanted to do. Now it says lack of direction. Jimmy Carter was really poor at working with Congress. If you want to be a good president, you got to be like Lyndon Johnson. You have to work with or pressure people to get things done. You have to form coalitions with people. That's the way any job works. If you want to get anything done and you need to work with people, you have to figure out ways to work with people. You can't just come in and be like, okay, this is how I'm going to do it, and you're going to do it this way. I mean, you can do that when you're a teacher, okay? Because like I am like ultimate power. I'm like more powerful than Thanos from the Avengers, man. Like basically, I can do almost anything. I've come to that conclusion. I can twist things, make your lives miserable. But basically, when you become president, you have to understand that there's 535 people you have to work with over in Washington. There's 100 senators and 435 members of Congress. And you either sink or swim based on your ability to build trust with those people and to work with those people. And Carter did none of that. Many of the Democrats, the Republicans of course hated him because, well, he's a Democrat. The Democrats didn't like him because the Democrats in the Northeast especially, they thought he was kind of a hick. You're from Georgia coming up here talking about your peanuts and your watermelon farm. Don't tell us how to do our jobs, And Carter was never able to forge that link with Congress to try to get things done. The economy suffered from tremendously high interest rates as a result of the inflation. To take out a mortgage back in, say, 1977, that's when I was born, okay? The average mortgage rate was like 15%. Oh my gosh, right? 15%. Mortgages are so down right now. You're looking at maybe 5 or 4% for a house. Imagine trying to buy a car back in the day. No 1.9% with no interest. You're looking at 20% interest loan for a car. The interest rates were outrageous. People blame Carter for that. Things were so bad in the 70s that Jimmy Carter actually did something that most presidents would think is pretty much insane. Here's what he did. He actually went to the presidential retreat at a place called Camp David. That's where a lot of presidents go to unwind and relax, maybe play a little golf, shoot stuff, not like people, but stuff. Unless you're Dick Cheney, then you shoot like other people. But he goes there, and what he does is he invites a number of people to come. And these people are average people from throughout the United States. Just a group of them, like maybe 20 of them or so. Some are politicians, some are just business owners and stuff. And he meets with them, and he has like a clipboard with a legal pad, and he sits down and he asks them, what's wrong with America? What is going on by your perspective? What can we do to fix America? And by God, he listens to all these people. I mean, that's pretty much unheard of for a president. No, most of the time, presidents just do whatever they think is important, right? But Carter's listening. Weeks later, he gets on television in what's called the Malaise speech. The Malaise speech is basically him saying, America, and I'm quoting him, he says, America faces a crisis of confidence. And he starts talking a little bit about that America's in a terrible situation, almost like a malaise. A malaise meaning a sickness, or like America's sick. It's like a darkness, you know. And he starts talking about how doomy and gloomy America is and offering up very few solutions. And what's interesting is, even though he does that, the public opinion polls for him start to uptick a little bit because people like the honesty. You know, they're like, okay, you're not trying to sugarcoat it for us. You're telling us exactly how it is. We understand. Now, is this going to mean he's going to win an election? Not really. Carter was good, maybe not at working with Congress, but he excelled in foreign policy. And so let's talk about this one. In the Panama Canal, Jimmy Carter wanted to improve America's image throughout the world. Instead of being a nation where we go out and try to stop communism from spreading and killing innocent people as we do that, because if you remember, Vietnam was a war where we did that. Instead of doing that stuff, President Carter basically tried to work with the nations of the world. And one of the things that showed that is he worked with the Panama Canal, with the nation of Panama, to negotiate an agreement to give back the Panama Canal to Panama by the end of the century, by about 1999 or so. And so Jimmy Carter basically shows that America, I think, is all about human rights. And that's exactly what he's trying to portray to the rest of the world. And that's exactly what he's doing. Another example of that is a very famous incident called the Camp David Accords. And in the Camp David Accords, basically what President Carter does is something that's really unthinkable. He gets the leaders of Israel and Egypt together, okay, to hammer out a peace deal so that Israel's not going to be attacked and that Egypt's not going to attack or get attacked by Israel, to try to make things more peaceful in the Middle East, because we need to make things peaceful in the Middle East, because what's at stake if we don't make peace in the Middle East? What's going to happen to our oil supply, right? We've got to work to make peace happen. And that's one good thing that Carter did. So again, not good at working with Congress. He certainly wasn't a guy that got an immense amount of things done, but one thing that he did is that. Another thing too, you might remember Nixon did this, SALT 1. SALT 1 means Strategic Arms Limitations Talks. Well, Carter meets with the Russians again to hammer out a deal to work out the destruction of nuclear weapons. Again, it's called SALT 2. It's, again, trying to make America's policy more about peace, justice, human rights. America hasn't always had the greatest track record on that, right? So Jimmy Carter's trying to restore America's image. Because if we don't restore America's image think about what happened with Watergate. If we don't do that, what's going to happen? In the eyes of the world, we'll be the big, bad Americans, and one wants us to be a little bit more caring, loving, a kinder, gentler America, a touchy-feely America that doesn't say, we're going to bash communism out of you. Instead, we're going to take you under our big arm and give you a noogie and be like, hey,